on. Good afternoon or evening or morning, Professor Whelan. It's my closing argument, brought to you from Boothroyd Lounge. This is where I live, give you an insight into my life. So here we go. The prosecution is State v. Dawson. Thank you, Your Honor. Opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. This case is about Danny Dawson, who on the evening of September 24th into the morning of September 25th knew exactly what he was doing. He knew he had responsibilities. He knew he had been chosen to be the designated driver. He knew that his decisions were putting innocent people's lives in danger. But he kept making these reckless decisions because he hadn't had enough fun yet. And because of this, Vanessa Sullivan is dead. And Danny Dawson's laugh may have been one of the last sounds she ever heard. As the prosecution, we carried the burden of proof in this case, as my co-counsel, Zach Burke, told you at the start of this trial. We have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Danny Dawson is guilty of driving under the influence and of murder. And today, ladies and gentlemen, evidence and testimony have shown that Danny Dawson is guilty of both of these charges. Let's begin with the first charge, driving under the influence. You heard from Ryan Foster, the police officer. Almost immediately after the accident, Officer Foster performed a series of sobriety tests on Danny Dawson. If someone fails a sobriety test, it shows that they've been driving under the influence, over the legal limit of alcohol intoxication. Dawson failed the first test. He failed the second test. And then he failed the third test. Now the defense may argue that it was the rain that affected one of the tests. Well, this could be argued for the sobriety test in which he had to walk in a straight line, which may have affected the roads being slippery. It can't be argued that it affected two of the other tests, one where he had to stand on one foot, and the HGN test, in which Officer Foster shined a light into Dawson's eyes to see if he was showing signs of intoxication, jerking of the pupil, which he did. Furthermore, it only takes one failure of a sobriety test to prove that you were driving under the influence. Dawson failed not one, not two, but 3 sobriety tests. This simply proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Dawson is guilty of driving under the influence. The second charge we bring forth today is murder. To prove that someone has committed murder, we must show that under the circumstances, he behaved recklessly and with an extreme indifference to human life. And evidence and testimony today have shown that Dawson, throughout the night, made decision after decision after decision that knowingly put people's lives in danger, and he kept doing it because he hadn't had enough fun yet. First, you heard from Pat Lawrence, the server at Chuggy's who personally served Dawson his drinks that evening. After he served Dawson a glass of straight whiskey, Dawson told Lawrence that he had been chosen and would be the designated driver for that evening. Then he had 3 whiskey cocktails, a pint of beer, 3 screwdrivers, a tequila sunrise, and a shot of Everclear. That's 10 drinks. And also Dawson had asked the bartender to make the drinks stronger that evening. So he had 10 strong drinks. And that's not counting however many shots he had with Jordan James. Or the 3 screwdrivers that were ordered for Vanessa Sullivan and just happened to keep disappearing in front of him, even though Vanessa wasn't drinking them. What kind of person has between 10 to 15 strong drinks after he had been chosen to be the designated driver? Someone who's willing to put drinking and having fun over the lives and safety of other people. Now, the defense may argue that Dawson didn't have those 3 screwdrivers or any extra shots with the bartender because Pat Lawrence didn't see them. But Jordan James testified that he did take shots with Dawson. And common sense tells us that if Dawson ordered these drinks, and he had been drinking plenty that night, and Vanessa Sullivan wasn't drinking the drinks, and that he had been sipping on those drinks throughout the night, common sense tells us he finished them. But even if he didn't have those 3 screwdrivers, or those extra shots with Jordan James, he still failed a sobriety test, which shows that he was consumed enough alcohol knowingly to put him over the legal intoxication limit, after he had been chosen to be the designated driver. So he could take Vanessa and Taylor back home safely, so that no one's lives would be at risk. But instead, Dawson's decisions put Vanessa and Taylor's lives at risk, put other drivers' lives at risk, and put his own life at risk, and cost Vanessa her life. Clearly, having a good time and drinking was more important to Dawson than the safety of others. Then you heard from Ryan Foster. Foster not only testified about the sobriety test, but also about the weather and the road conditions that evening. It was raining hard. It was hard to see out a driver's window. The roads were slick and wet, making it more dangerous for driving. Even more dangerous that it was on Canyon Road. It's a poorly maintained road. There are sharp curves. The locals call it Death Valley. A reasonable person would take a safer road home, and even if he had to take Canyon Road, would drive under the speed limit and cautiously. But before he left, Dawson said he wanted to make Richard Petty, the NASCAR driver, look like he belonged in the slow lane. And he chose to drive more than twice the speed limit on a dangerous road, 66 miles an hour, as he whipped around the winding curves. Clearly, the thrill of driving dangerously outweighed the safety of Vanessa and Taylor. Now, the defense may argue that it was the poor road conditions of Canyon Road that led to the accident, or a deer, not Dawson's driving. But do not forget that Dawson had the chance to drive on a safer road, and he chose the more dangerous one. That he had the opportunity not to drink, and chose to drink. And that Vanessa and Taylor had asked him to slow down, and he ignored them. This is reckless behavior and extremely indifferent to the lives of others. Finally, you heard from Taylor Hobson, who showed us that Dawson time and time again that night refused to care about her safety and Vanessa's safety. When Taylor told him that she was worried about him drinking and then driving her home safely, Dawson said, "Lighten up, Taylor. Anyone can have a few drinks and still be fine to drive." When Taylor told Dawson she thought that he was too drunk to drive home and was worried about getting her home safely, he said, "Challenge accepted." When they had the chance to get a cab, after multiple people had told Dawson that he was not safe to drive, he told that cab driver to get lost. When Taylor told Dawson to slow down as he was driving at dangerous speeds and whipping around the curves of Canyon Road in the rain, he took his eyes off the road and yelled at her to stop nagging. She was fearful for her own life. She made this clear to Dawson, and he still ignored her. What kind of person hears cries for help and ignores them? What college-educated man would put 2 women's lives in danger so that he could have a good time? Someone who cares about having fun and not the lives of others. Someone who is extremely indifferent to human life. Now, the defense may argue that his behavior is normal, that it's human nature to be somewhat self-interested, common sense to want to go out and have a good time at a bar. But it's also common sense to care about the safety of your friends. Common sense to make decisions that don't put people's lives at risk, and common sense to listen to people when they tell you that they're fearful for their own lives. But Dawson threw common sense out the window that evening. He behaved recklessly and extremely indifferent to human life because he wanted to have fun, and as a result, Vanessa Sullivan is dead. His behavior proves that he is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of murder. Now, ladies and gentlemen, during deliberation, I would like you to keep in mind the biases of the opposing counsel's witnesses. You heard from Jordan James, the bartender, whose testimony, quite frankly, is more about money than it is the truth. He described himself as a good buddy of Danny Dawson, who had given him more than $750 in tips that summer, an incredibly high amount to get from any one customer. He admitted he did shots with Danny Dawson that night, and that if the situation called for it, he might feel obligated to stick up for his rainmaker. Surely if someone's making money off a customer, he would want to testify in court in his favor so he can keep being his customer, so Dawson can keep giving James tips. Now, James testified that Chuggy's drinks are typically on the weak side, which he tried to go to show that Dawson wasn't intoxicated. But let's not forget that Dawson asked James to make the drink stronger that night, which completely negates his argument. And you heard from Danny Dawson, who claims that he didn't have more than a drink an hour, and that there was a deer in the road, among other things. Even if that were to be true, let's not forget that he knew he was a designated driver and he kept drinking. He knew that he had the chance to drive on a safer road, and he took the more dangerous one. He knew that he was putting Vanessa and Taylor's lives in danger, and he wouldn't listen to them. So their witnesses are here to make money and save their own skin. Nothing more. The defense's testimonies do not raise any reasonable doubt that Danny Dawson is guilty in this case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as you head to deliberation, I want you to keep in mind that justice is blind. It is blind to race, gender, sexual orientation, religion. It is blind to the fact that Vanessa Sullivan's mother is a local prosecutor. I want you to keep in mind that Vanessa Sullivan's mother is not on trial today, but Danny Dawson is. Lady Justice is blind. But I can assure you, based on the evidence and testimony today, if someone were to lift that blindfold from Lady Justice's eyes, she would shed a tear if Danny Dawson is not convicted of the punishment that his action deserves, to be guilty of murder and driving under the influence. Thank you for your time.